We have new developments on a high-profile lawsuit against the NFL. Now, it involves a beloved coach who was burned in effigy for some emails. There was an email dump. You might remember the story a couple years ago. A surgical email assassination, it has been called, of none other than Jon Gruden. So if you haven't been following along, we've given various updates over the last couple of years on this Jon Gruden story. We've learned now a big one, a big humdinger of an update. So the Nevada Supreme Court, the highest court in that state, has sided with the NFL, but more importantly, against former Raiders coach Jon Gruden, reversing a lower court's decision that had denied the NFL's motion to send Jon Gruden's complaint into its arbitration process. So what does this mean in layman's terms? All right, I'll explain it. I'll explain it to you like you're 5 years old. So unless Jon Gruden can appeal somewhere else, which he's going to try to do, unless he can successfully appeal, turn out the lights, the party's over for Jon Gruden's case. This goes back to 2021, the lawsuit in which his legal team said that he was forced to resign. I don't know anyone that disagree with that Jon Gruden was forced to resign. You might remember that scandal came out. Gruden coached another game, if I remember correctly, it was against the Chicago Bears. And then it was after that game, a second wave of email was dumped because the NFL wanted to make sure that Jon Gruden was assassinated as coach of the Raiders. The first dump did not work, so they had to dump some more emails later on. That's the way I interpret the story. So unless something changes at a higher court, that's it. Jon Gruden will not move forward in the public theater, which means this will fall into the arbitration process, the NFL's beloved arbitration. So let us discuss the question. Jon Gruden being stonewalled from suing the NFL. What is your take on this? So my take on this, I've got the palm, chess piece, and pigs in a blanket. And we will combine all of these things together, and we are going to make the dump button, which I have right next to me. I don't use this very often. I usually let Lorena use the dump button, but I do have a dump button in here for emergency situations. It's like a game show from the 1980s. You just, boom, you hit that thing. It's really cool. Anyway, so first of all, to just get right to the meat of the matter, we are not surprised. We've been saying all along that even though it was looking good for Jon Gruden, the NFL's play on this has always been, we'll just keep appealing to a higher court, and we have friends in low places on high courts. So we'll just keep going and going and going, and we'll play the long game, not the short game. Now, speaking of that, you get the micro and the macro on this Jon Gruden story. In the short term, which is the micro, Jon Gruden, as we mentioned, he had scored some early victories in this, and it looked good, and he found a sympathetic judge, and that seemed pretty cool. However, in the macro, Jon Gruden has a better chance of moving to Russia, becoming a citizen of Russia, Mother Russia, and beating Vladimir Putin in a presidential election. He's got a better chance of that happening at this point than beating the Raiders and beating the NFL really in court, which is who he's going after, the NFL. I mean, that's just the way it is. And here's why. The NFL, in every single contract, the NFL, if you don't know how this works, they put a poison pill in the contract. Now, it's only a poison pill for the employee. It's not a poison pill for the NFL or the team that is hiring the members of the cartel that are hiring people to work in the NFL. And the proviso, the poison pill, guarantees that if you have any kind of a beef with the NFL, you feel like you were wronged, there was something that was done untoward to you, the NFL will decide. They'll go to arbitration, and Roger Goodell or one of his buddies will adjudicate the matter. Now, the NFL, in the language, because the lawyers want this in there because it helps their case when these cases go to court and people sue and say that's not fair, the NFL says at the behest of Roger Goodell, so it is possible he can hire someone else to adjudicate the case. But ultimately, whoever they put in there, the NFL, is paid by the NFL to decide the matters. And I go back to the theory, and I'm not the first one that came up with this. This is akin to having a criminal case. It's not a criminal case, but the alleged perpetrator gets to decide whether or not they're guilty or not. That's essentially what the NFL's got in every one of these contracts. Jon Gruden says, hey, I got screwed over here. I'm getting the short end of the stick, and I would like to get my money. I want to sue you. And the NFL's like, well, let's decide whether or not we screwed you. Let's decide that. And it's a great line that Jon Gruden's emails, they were handpicked for public ridicule, right? And how do you like them apples? Now, Brent Musburger, you're looking live. Brent Musburger said it best as the voice of the Raiders. He said that what happened to Jon Gruden was a professional hit job by a paid assassin. They didn't go the usual media goombas, according to Musburger. That's his famous quote, knock on wood if you're with me. And it is true that normally when stuff gets leaked, it goes to like Adam Schefter or somebody like that, or the state-sponsored NFL media. In the Jon Gruden story, the stuff that was leaked went to two people, mainly the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. The Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. They were the ones that got the dirt. Now, we would be shocked if some NFL bigwig in this latest turn in the story did not have a nice meal at the Palm. Not that kind of palm, but the greasing of the palm. Ergo, would you like to have a nice skybox at a upcoming game of your choosing? Would you like to go to the Super Bowl in New Orleans in early 2025? Old-fashioned bribery. Old-fashioned bribery in play. Now, the key to me with Gruden is, and this is why Gruden, I think, is really getting the raw end of the deal on this particular story, is unlike almost all of the other examples of this happening where somebody tries to take down somebody else, we have not seen the dog pile. Unless I missed it. Maybe I did. You can correct me on that. But typically when someone has an allegation against them, there is a conga line of people lined up to play the victim card and say, oh, this guy's such a schmuck, such a loser, such a dingleberry. Wait till you hear what they did to me, right? Trying to one-up each other. I didn't sense that with Jon Gruden. I didn't get that. Normally you get 548 stories of people saying that Jon Gruden is this ism and that ism and this other ism and all that. But I didn't get that. Didn't see a second wave of people who were running out to yell at cameras or on social media to get clout. I didn't see it. All right, now secondly, we turn to politics, of all things. In a recent interview with Tucker Carlson, Aaron Rodgers gave his reaction. I know you're dying to hear his reaction to Robert F. Kennedy making a pitch for Rodgers. Remember, we talked about this. Got a monologue out of it, thank God, before the story went away, that Rodgers was in the running to be the vice presidential candidate on the ticket, the independent ticket for the 2024 election, which is coming up this November. Vote early and vote often. So Aaron Rodgers said there was a time when he truly entertained the thought of this. Okay, then. Rodgers claims he seriously considered the VP spot from RFK Jr. Do you believe Aaron Rodgers? Do you believe Aaron Rodgers on this? So I'll go first. I am agnostic. I'm a skeptic on this one. And I had an epiphany. I had an epiphany on this story, and I'd like to share my epiphany because I know you're dying to hear my epiphany. So here's my epiphany on the Aaron Rodgers vice presidential story. Rodgers' name was floated to a bunch of media outfits. We know that. A bunch of people reported the story. But they were looking, if you look back at what they were doing, what the RFK Jr. thing was doing, the campaign, what they were doing here was they were using Aaron Rodgers like you would use a pawn in chess. He was a pawn in the political game for free media coverage. It's very expensive to buy commercials on television and radio, and even the internet's not cheap on sites people actually visit. So it's expensive. So what's a way to generate free publicity? Say that Aaron Rodgers might be my vice presidential candidate. Dopes like me eat that up. It's great content, great engagement. We love it. Guess what? It worked, right? We did it, and turns out that RFK Jr. went with someone named Nicole Shanahan. I don't know who that is, but she's some big shot in Northern California in the tech world, and so she's the running mate. And do I think that Aaron Rodgers in his head thought that he would be the vice president? Yes, I do. Do I think he was actually seriously being considered for the vice presidential position? No, I don't. All right, final thought. We head to Florida now. I read that the Jaguars and the city of Jacksonville have agreed to a $1.4 billion renovation project of the stadium, their Everbank Stadium. The key part of this is a 30-year lease. 30 years. That's a generation and a half that the team will have to commit to stay in that city. The question, the Jags, they have a tentative agreement. If this goes through, and it looks like it will go through, that will keep the NFL franchise in Jacksonville for the long haul. What does that tell us? What does that tell us? So my first thing is this is a sweetheart deal. Man, is this a sweetheart deal. Because if you look at the fine print, the taxpayers in Jacksonville and in that part of Florida will be giving $650 million of public money, your hard-earned dollars and cents, to subsidize an NFL team that doesn't even play all of their 8 or 9 home games a year, depending if it's 17, 17 you get the extra home game or not. They don't even play all their games in Jacksonville, right? They've been going over to Europe, playing games over there for years. Talk about being a sucker. And when you take a couple of steps back and you look at it, the wide-angle lens on this story with Jacksonville, to me, it's a dead giveaway. It's a dead giveaway that the NFL product is not selling the way they thought it was going to sell in the UK. Now, Terry in England and some other guys that listen to us abroad can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the NFL, I was told by somebody that works in the NFL years ago that the plan was, you use Jacksonville and they're going to play them for years and they're going to add some other games, but ultimately the goal was to move a team, Jacksonville being that team, to London. They want to go across the Atlantic to London and put the Jags in there. And so the fact that they're going to agree to this deal, assuming, depending on the loopholes, we don't know the fine print on this, but assuming there's not any real loopholes in there that could get out of the deal, the NFL will continue to be pigs in a blanket. Right? Pigs in a blanket. They're on the appetizer menu in London. They're not the main course. Now, I have heard that the players' union was upset with the idea of having to force players that are drafted out of college to move to London and established veteran players. And to that, I laughed when somebody told me that, because I said, when has the NFL ever done anything looking out for the players? They don't give a crap about the players, whether they have to live in London or not. It doesn't matter to them. So that's where we are, right? You can change my mind if you want, but that's where I am.